The recording is in progress indeed. This event follows our online discussions, which started in 2021. The previous webinars focused on digital skills and the digital readiness of microenterprises, and then on how companies' behavior responds to existing climate policy goals, and the third one in December 2021 on de-urbanization. Today, we will discuss certain aspects of the European innovation agenda with, as you know, 5 major initiatives targeting at making Europe a global innovation leader, including the creating of the European innovation ecosystem, or the upgrading of the existing European innovation ecosystem. However, our discussion is more targeted at bringing experience and practice from Central and Eastern Europe, hence the participants. We will introduce our learnings of the EU and national innovation promoting programs and various aspects of their exploitation in Central and Eastern Europe. So the CEE is going to be our focus. Our discussion, in part at least, will be building on the Institute's input to the Commission's latest public consultation. Therefore, we shall touch upon frameworks, challenges, success stories, if there are, and of course, shortcomings. Now, my name is Pál Belényesi, and I will steer the event today. Before introducing today's event more in detail, I would like to give the opportunity to Kinga Kenyeres, Vice President of Századvég, to briefly welcome the participants. Kinga, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Pál. I would also like to welcome everyone to the webinar of Századvég Konjunktúrakutató. As Pál had mentioned, we will cover today innovation in Central and Eastern Europe and the new European innovation agenda. But let me first give you a brief background of our company and the seminar. Századvég Konjunktúrakutató carries out economic analysis and research related to numerous policy fields along its 8 business lines, which include digital economy, social research, energy and climate, development policy, education and innovation, macroeconomics, health, and rural development. Our works delivered to our private and public sector clients are complemented by our primary research capacities, which use multiple qualitative and quantitative methodologies, including recent surveying technologies such as social listening or eye tracking analysis. By this webinar, we would like to contribute to the discussion, in particular as to how better interconnecting innovation ecosystems and what to do to more effectively bridge the innovation divide within the EU by providing hands-on experience and examples from our region. As part of our strategy to boost our international presence, Századvég plans to host further webinars and discussions in relevant topics of European public policies in the upcoming year. But now, please allow me to likewise welcome to our guests, András Inotai, Head of the Unit Innovation Policy and Access to Finance at the European Commission's Directorate General for Research and Innovation, Bohumil Kartous, who is the Director of the Prague Innovation Institute, and Dr. Péter Lábody, Vice President for Legal, International and Innovation Affairs at the Hungarian Intellectual Property. I'm sure that their insight will provide a significant added value to the focus, and the discussion will be vivid, touching many relevant topics and points. Thank you for your participation, and I wish you all a great session. Thank you.
Thank you, Kinga. Let's jump straight to the agenda. The first event within the event is going to be the introduction and a short analysis by a representative of the institution. Then we will have a panel of 3 prominent, yet again, representatives from the public sector. And I'd like to underline that they come from 3 different levels: the Commission, national, and then regional and local. And I am going to introduce the panelists in due course. We will then have a round of questions to the participants and an open discussion with the audience, should there be any more questions. Now, housekeeping. We cannot start without housekeeping, obviously, because this is an online webinar. We have gotten used to it in the past 2.5 years. But once again, let's just remind everybody that if you have questions, write your questions in the chat box, starting with the indication of whom you're addressing the query or with the query. We will collect the questions and then pass them on to the intended panelist. The event is recorded and it will be made available on the Institute's website. This is for GDPR reasons, privacy, whatnot. So please, if you are not happy with this, unfortunately, we would like to thank you for your interest, but that is how it's going to be. One of the main reasons for that there are several interested people out there who have asked for the recording because they couldn't participate at this time of the webinar. All presentations will also be made available and accessible on the same website. Now, after housekeeping, let me give you a very brief introduction about the subject matter that we're discussing. As we probably all know, the European Commission recently run a public consultation as a call for evidence for the new European Innovation Agenda. The new policy direction, as it is mostly referred to, among others, aims at better interconnecting innovation ecosystems and bridging the innovation divide between regions and member states within the EU. The call for evidence, as we know, generated a rather manifold discussion within the innovation community, but not only. And this is how we come to our webinar. We'd like to contribute to this discussion, in particular, as how to better interconnect innovation ecosystems and what to do more effectively, more efficiently in order to bridge the innovation divide within the EU. Now, how would we like to achieve that? Very simple, by providing hands-on experience and examples from the CEE region. Also, bearing in mind that the countries within this region are mostly emerging innovators, except perhaps for Czechia, which is already a moderate innovator, so with higher scores. Finally, I think I'm not the only one to say that the present patchwork of innovation supporting policies, actions, initiatives in the EU do need to be fine-tuned. I think that's rather commonly agreed, improved and systematized. There is indeed a need for a comprehensive revision of the existing financial tools and the legislative framework. And I know from previous discussions that the Commission is aiming at this and has done a very important groundwork to support the ideas. The foundation or the new policy direction emerging from the innovation agenda, we believe, I personally very strongly believe, that could be the basis for creating a single European market for innovation, for ideas, talents, cooperation, market capitalization, and access to markets, all which are very important if we want to reap the benefits of innovation. But in this, each member state of the EU must gain equal ranks. Now, after that very short introduction, let me come to the first presentation that is going to be provided by Bence, who is the director of PMO at the Századvég Konjunktúrakutató and has over 12 years of experience in project management and project delivery. As you've seen the introduction, his experience includes planning and evaluating corporate development and RDI support programs and schemes. And he has experience both in advising very small companies and applying funding and applying on behalf of his own firm as well. He's a lecturer also at the Péter Catholic University in Budapest. So please, Bence, the floor is yours.
There. Thank you very much for the introduction, Pál, and thank you all for participating, and I would like to welcome you all as well. I would like to give you a brief introduction on the topic of boosting innovation in Central and Eastern Europe, how we see the current playing field, and what our experiences as advisors and our lessons learned are where we see that the boosting of innovation can advance very well. If we look at the following map, and if we look at the added value, the average added value of companies per capita in Europe. So this would be the number of only the added value and per person in 2020 in the year. We see that there is indeed a quite large difference and a divide within Europe, especially if we look at it in the Eastern and the Western way. And this is so this gives large differences within Europe. And why is this important in our respect for innovation? Because we believe that innovation is the tool which not only supports companies and the added value of particular companies, but it indeed has the spillover and the multiplier effect, which then enhances not only the companies, but also the regions, the nations, and the EU as a whole. So it will be able to develop and to become more competitive. And so it can become indeed a global innovation leader. When supporting innovation, the European structural and investment funds play a key role, especially in CEE. You can also see that in Southern Europe, it plays a key role. If we now, in the current map, we can see all support from the 2014-2020 period in euro per capita per annum. So this means that, for example, in the Czech Republic, for every year, 32 euro was spent for every person under TO1. TO1 is the thematic objective of research innovation. And of course, there are many other thematic objectives which were supported, but this is something which we wanted to highlight. There you can see that it is a lot higher support than what you can see throughout Western Europe. It is also important, if you see the lower numbers for Romania and Bulgaria, they are compensated by TO3 support, which aims at support at SMEs. But still, the divide is seen that EC plays a key role here. But also other support is available in these countries. For example, national innovation funds. In the case of Hungary, the National RDI Fund managed by the RDI Agency of Hungary provided between 2018 and 2020 an additional 29 euro per capita. So almost the same amount of grant funding as it is available from ESIF. Further funding will be provided, for example, by the Recovery and Resilience Facility, which is to be launched or has been launched in many countries already. For example, in Slovakia, they plan to allocate, especially to innovation activities and focusing on innovation support, 738 million euros, which amounts to, again, 19 euro per person per year. So it's also quite a large number, which is available there. And they focus it especially on mobilizing excellent researchers and projects, public-private research cooperation, and innovation bootstraps. All this support aims at very different types of promoting innovation. And also it needs to be mentioned the startup and venture capital financing, which is on a rise. More and more capital funds are emerging, especially we see that in Hungary. Capital funds aiming at startups and aiming at early growth phases are now available in more than 40 of them, and their number is rising, and they may well amount to a similar amount as you can see now. So per capita per annum, it can be more than 10 euros, more than 20 euros even. So what the key message is that there is funding in place and available. Yet, as you saw, there is still a large divide. Another different aspect is, if we look at the same figure, so annual funding per capita in the 2014-2020 period, focusing on the common strategic framework, research and innovation. So this basic, more or less means Horizon 2020 funding. There you can see that Eastern Europe, Central and Eastern Europe did not focus that much on this type of support by the European Union, although this type of support is the one which fosters international cooperation, also with the same aim which we mentioned earlier, the spillover and the multiplier effect, where through international cooperation, the best practices and knowledge acquired in other countries can travel through the borders and to other countries as well. It is interesting to see, of course, in the Benelux countries are quite highly proportioned here. Almost 25% of all Horizon 2020 funding went to the Benelux countries. So in this matter, we do believe that new approaches are needed to bring these innovation initiatives to Central and Eastern European countries to indeed make this spillover effect work. Another incentive which is in place to support innovation and also research and development are very different tax incentives. These vary by country very much. There is no, so what we see is that there are national strategies rather than any certain direct trends. In Hungary, we have many different forms of these support. Development tax incentives aim at front-end support, so they aim at supporting the investments when the costs arise at the same time. R&D allowances in corporate income tax aim at supporting it from the back end, so after the post-investment period. And also we have deductibility in place, which helps companies to deduct certain cost elements from their tax base, and also other allowances for vocational training contributions and the social securities. And also in Hungary, which is rather unique in Europe, we have local regional tax incentives as well for companies if they are very active in R&D and I activities. But yet, even though we see that there is this large amount of support, there is an innovation divide present. And this is the map, which most of you probably know. This is from the Regional Innovation Scoreboard. What is important to know, this map comes from 32 indicators, which are manifold. They also include if there is available funding, but it is only a few of these 32 indicators. This includes educational indicators, broadband penetration, collaboration of companies, the number of patents and trademarks are there in the country. So there we can see that the innovation divide is indeed present, and there is, because of this, there is definitely things to do around this. So what is it, what we think should be done? To see where we have our lessons learned, I want to give you a very brief overview of our experience in innovation activities. We have lots of works going on and experience in innovation ecosystems. This includes the planning and evaluation of national programs and national schemes, both in corporate development and in RDI, as mentioned. And also we carry out many local economic assessments which focus on certain municipal regions and smaller regions in Hungary. These assessments of ours often include surveys, large surveys, maybe even 1,000 representative corporate surveys, where we ask even 1,000 corporations, interviews with local stakeholders, and many interviews with local companies. But also our experience, which we were able to gain through centralized EU funding. We are ourselves participants of Horizon calls, with some of our applications still being under the decision, where we hope that we will be able to participate actively in the Horizon programs. And also we carried out a project recently to assess how Hungarian entities relate to centralized EU funding, how they use them, why they use them, what are the burdens if they are not using them. This included also surveying, interviews with Hungarian companies, but also we did an international benchmark where we interviewed supporting agencies of different Central Eastern European countries. So the three lessons learned, which I would like to point out at this place is, number one, national initiatives are in place. As you saw also in our previous slides, there are many national programs running, and in the upcoming 2021-27 period, we do not see any groundbreaking changes either in EC funding or in state aid rules, and especially with RRF, there will be even more funding available. So we do not see large challenges on the national level, and also the indirect tax incentives are in place. Of course, one can argue that with the ongoing or upcoming economic crisis, funding may be limited, but we do believe that countries, the member states will also realize the spillover effect of innovation, and therefore support for innovation will remain intact. So the second lesson learned would indeed be that streamlining European initiatives is key, and this is why we very much anticipate the new European innovation agenda as well. To point out three things which we think are important here is the alignment of policies and programs, both on a strategic level, which is very well known and widely talked about. So not to have parallel programs running. We saw several examples of this in our practice. And every time what we see is that companies will go for the easy marks. They will go for the more available and more accessible funds. And for example, if you look at EC for Horizon, they will definitely go for EC because they know it better. It is more relatable to them. They will not bother going to apply for Horizon funds if they do not understand what the difference is and what the added value of Horizon funding is, for example. But also on the operational level, alignment is important to companies. So to have as much as possible similar operational rules regarding eligibility, accounting rules, because very often the capacities of corporations is limited. So the staff will not be able to learn how multiple programs work. We do believe that the strengthened EU-wide network is very important. This includes national, regional offices where you have dedicated experts who support the companies. Dedicated experts with experience is a key, which is very important. So persons who have themselves worked or as a company or even as an officer with centralized EU funding, because they can bring the experience with which they can make the company's activities in this area very efficient. And if you can connect these actors, that can bring a large added value to it. And of course, clear, direct, and transparent support, easy access to the centralized funds, which is also well known. And the third and last lesson learned, which I would like to point out, is that reaching out to local entities is key. We see that companies and corporations with a national presence, and also entities with a national presence, they mostly and generally are aware of all sorts of support. They have capacities to play there, to be active and to take a part of it. But many entities and companies who have a local presence, especially SMEs, mid-caps and medium enterprises and small enterprises, they very often are not aware of this and do not have capacities to work to innovate in depth. They are very often happy with the way they work, and very often they even say they do not want to grow. They just want to remain there where they are right now. And this is where we see a very large potential for innovation and a very large potential to grow also within added value. To reach these companies, tailored acceleration and mentoring is necessary. What we see as a large burden is mistrust and risk adherence of these companies. But once they understand and learn how these are, how they can add to their operation, and if they get these lessons from people who they trust, then they will participate in these as well. Because what we experience is that the entry burden is large. This may be knowing the language or knowing how funding works. And if you ask, if you survey companies, they will list a large list of challenges why they do not reach out to European innovation, to the European level of innovation. But another interesting fact is that if you ask them, those who have already participated, if they are planning to participate in the upcoming period, those who know the answer, more than 90% will say, yes, we will. Even 50% say definitely. And so there, whoever enters this international innovation sphere, what our experience shows us that they will remain on board and they will go on with that. What they need is external support and peer support. Once they are on board and they see that the networks are they are working, they will very much they will remain on board. To do this, we believe in the strengthening of local ecosystems, and I see that I am running out of time. So I would just like to give you one or two examples, because on a regional level, there are large differences. One of my favorite examples is when we talk with universities, and some universities in a municipality, you talk to the city and you talk to the university, they both say they have very good contact, they are cooperating, and they will even mention that, yes, yesterday I had a meeting with them, we talked about how we should enhance in the next upcoming years. And then in another city, when you ask the university how you cooperate with companies, they will not mention companies by name. And if you try to find out, it turns out that they have cooperations with one or two companies only locally. So there is a large room to strengthen these local ecosystems who can support each other. And one of the best practices of this is the local organizations, which are starting up now in Hungary, where actually these organizations aiming at supporting the development of these ecosystems, they would reach out to literally all companies, and within a year, which has 200 working days, every day they would visit 2 companies, and within a few years, they would have direct contact with hundreds of companies, knowing what they need, knowing what their burdens are, and knowing how they will be open to innovate and to enter this sphere. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bence. I did not want to stop you, although I did send you a message just warning you that you're getting close to the end of your time available for the presentation. So this last slide that you popped up, it kind of reminded me of my personal experience with universities, but I blinkered at the list of participants and I've noticed, I cheated a little bit, I noticed that there are representatives from the industry actually who have daily, I know that they have daily connections with the universities and research institutions in Hungary. So if we heard from them, I'd be very pleased, even if they sent a couple of messages, because I know that what universities say may not be represented fully by the industry participants. So we know that the funding is there, funding is available, but why is it not used more efficiently, more effectively, more meaningfully? I'm sure both sides have their views, and it would be great to hear. Also, I did notice in your presentation that there seems to be an axis in Europe, a vertical axis between the innovators, emerging innovators, and the more sort of advanced ones, and it's in the middle of Europe. So both left and right, south of Spain, south of Italy, seem to have the same colors as Central Eastern Europe. Whether it's cultural or not, but it was an interesting thing to say and see also. Now, the next person to present is probably the person whom most of the participants want to hear from, András Inotai, who is the head of the Unit of Innovation Policy and Access to Finance, DG Research and Innovation of the European Commission. He is the man who's currently overseeing the development of the new European Innovation Agenda very directly, sleeping not so much, and also several aspects of innovation financing. András has been with the European Commission for 19 years, And his former roles include being senior advisor to Commissioner Vella and also a member of the cabinet of former Commissioner Maria Damanaki. I have the great pleasure of welcoming András and thanking him for accepting our invitation. He's not only an expert of this, but also obviously industrial and competition policy. We've known each other for over 20 years or so. So I'm really delighted to see him on board and looking forward to his presentation. So András, the floor is yours.
Good morning to all of you, and many thanks, Pál, and as well to the organizers for hosting this event. I think it comes at a very timely moment, indeed, at a time when Europe and the European leadership is thinking about what needs to be done to improve Europe's innovation performance. I don't know if you can put up the slides that I have shared with you, Pál.
We have some trouble with the file. Is it possible that you share them?
Let me check. I think it should be possible. 1 second.
Okay. There you go.
Excellent. You have it. Great. Thanks a lot, Bence. That's great. Thank you so much. So we can actually go straight to the first slide. The next one, right? Great. So just to give you a background, why the European leadership is reflecting on the role of innovation, and it is doing so because there is now an increased recognition that innovation is the European answer to 4 big European challenges that the EU as a whole is facing. One of them is productivity growth. It has been around for several years as an issue. Innovation remains the main driver of the EU's economic growth. If you look at the previous decade, research and innovation investments contributed to something like 2/3 of labor productivity growth in Europe. So it is certainly a part of the economic reply to the need for productivity growth. It is also the reply to the need for moving to the green and the digital transition. If you look at the climate goals of the EU, we know that 2/3 of those goals could be reached through using existing technology, which simply needs to be better deployed. But we also know that about 1/3 of the efforts will need to come from new technologies which do not yet exist. It is also a reply to the post-COVID recovery. We have seen how Europe's innovative performance, in particular in the pharmaceutical area, contributed to addressing directly the pandemic, but also putting down the base for post-COVID recovery. And then more recently, following the Russian aggression against Ukraine, Europe has seen that it is quite dependent still on a number of technologies and suppliers, including for critical materials, critical technologies. And therefore, if it wants to become autonomous and more dependent, it needs to decouple from these technologies. Innovation is certainly a key component of that change. And with that, we can go to the next slide, please. Indeed. Europe is not starting from scratch. So it is actually building on quite a robust set of assets that it has developed over the previous decades. as you know, it has really excellent science and research. It has only 7% of the world's population, but it has 20% of scientific publications. It has 20% of patent applications. Almost the same amount of researchers worldwide are in Europe. So it really has the scientific underpinning. It has a great internal market of 500 million consumers, which allows the companies that start in Europe to scale up and benefit from a large internal market. It has a very strong manufacturing base, which is extremely important because we are looking at a new dimension of innovation these days called the deep tech innovation, very much going from the lab directly to the market, high risk, fundamentally new breakthrough technologies. And this is very much benefiting and building on Europe's strong manufacturing base. If you look at wind energy, for example, a quarter of all the manufacturing facilities currently in the world for wind energy are located in Europe. Half of the manufacturers of wind energy are located in Europe. So it is an extremely strong basis to continue to build on. And fourth, and not least, we have seen that the countries who excel at innovation and the regions in the world which excel at innovation tend to be those which have stable institutions, democratic societies, and a stable rule of law. And Europe has these assets on its own, and this is what it can build on. We can go to the next slide, please. So how has Europe fared in the past couple of years and decades? If you compare it with the 2014 figures, it has increased its performance by something like 12–13%. Now, there are three main reasons for that. It's again, as Bence has mentioned, this is also a composite indicator, so it has many components. The real driving force behind the increase of Europe's innovation performance has been a better broadband penetration over the last decade, more venture capital expenditure, and also growing international scientific publications. So these three components have been driving the better innovation performance. However, if we compare to our global competitors, we still see the EU is lagging behind, especially compared to Japan, US, South Korea. Why is that? So if we look again a bit behind the figures, what do these countries have better compared to the EU? It is things like patent applications, and it is things like business expenditure in research and development. So not that much the public investment, but more of the private investment coming from these countries. And unfortunately, if we look at the performance gap between the EU and let's say Japan, South Korea, and the US again, that performance gap has unfortunately increased a bit. So Europe has a lot to do. So let's go to the next slide and see what it has to do. The Commission has carried out quite an extensive consultation process over the past couple of months, including a call for evidence and a special thanks to Századvég for having contributed to that consultation, because it has allowed the Commission to really have a very good overview of what's working well and what may need to be improved. And there are 5 areas which we have identified where further action may be required. And I will quickly run you through these 5 areas, but I want to spend a bit more time on innovation ecosystems, because I think that's the one which fits most for the purposes of this event and might be the most interest to the other speakers. But I do want to give you a quick overview of all the 5 areas. So if we go to access to finance, which is on the next slide. Access to finance. What do we see if we look at the access to finance landscape? We see that actually the startups in Europe are doing quite well. And if you look at the capital investment compared to the US, for smaller rounds of investments, so we are speaking about sub 5 million euros investments, the amounts invested into these startups are now pretty much the same in the EU and the US. About one third of all global investment, going into these startups is now in the EU, and about another third in the US. If we now look at how these have grown, these startups, we also see some promising developments. We have now twice as many unicorns, so the startups with a market value of over 1 billion euros. It's now a very fashionable KPI, key performance indicator of an innovation performance of a country or a region. How many unicorns can it produce? The EU has doubled the size of the number of unicorns in 2021. So only last year, very successful year in the EU, we have managed to double the number of unicorns. However, we continue to have a problem of scaling up in general. So that is going from a startup phase to scaling up, where investments required to scale up tend to be quite large. So we are speaking about 50 million euros of investments and above to allow these promising startup companies to grow. And there, the EU in general is not doing very well. Why is that? There are a number of reasons for that. One is that there's still not enough patient capital, private patient capital, so capital which is willing to wait for the investments to return, because it is investing in risky technologies. We also see that the European venture capital market is fragmented, which means that venture capital funds tend to invest mostly in the member states that they know well and where they operate, not that much across borders. We also see quite an underdeveloped IPO market. Startups, when they reach the stage of going public, many of them leave the EU and they go to list in foreign exchanges, in particular in the US. Many reasons for that. I can come back to that. And we also see still a lack of appropriate tax incentives in some of the countries, which would be otherwise favorable to these investments. Now, there is already a number of instruments in place at the EU level. You have the European Innovation Council, you have Escalar, you have Invest EU, which are there to mobilize significant funding, but there is certainly more that needs to be done. So as a part of the innovation agenda that we're working on, there are a number of things that we are looking at, how to incentivize, for example, big pension funds, big insurance funds to mobilize a part of their assets, which they tend to hold in either very safe assets, in particular government bonds, how to bring some of that to the market, or how we can think about using intellectual property rights, which some of the startups start to develop, whether these can be used as a collateral to get loans from the banks, who would otherwise be quite reluctant to invest in these companies because they don't really have any other assets at the early stage of development than intellectual property rights. So these are just some ideas that we have on the table, but I don't want to spend more time on that now. Next slide, please. The second challenge that we are looking at is overall the framework conditions. So it's not all about the money, and I think Bence has made that very clear as well, that even if there is money around for investments, there are other reasons why innovation performance may be suboptimal. So what we see at the European level overall is that the single market is still not complete, and if companies want to invest abroad, grow abroad, they are facing quite different regulatory environments. But it's not only across member states, it's also within member states where we hear that the regulatory frameworks within that member state are not always supportive of innovation. Risk-taking is not generally supported at a very high level by national regulatory environments. Again, we are not starting from scratch in this area either. The single market has been developing, and there are a number of areas where, through mutual recognition, EU-level legislation, the level playing field, the legal level playing field, has been established. The state aid rules have been modernized on a number of occasions in the past couple of years. There are now very large opportunities for member states to spend national money for innovative solutions, which previously would have been problematic under the state aid rules. Currently, that is not the case. And the EU itself is applying what is called a better regulation agenda, which means that all the legislation which is proposed is being systematically checked whether it is favorable or at least not distortive of the innovative process. But again, there are a number of other things that could be done. So we are looking at, in particular, experimentation clauses or regulatory sandboxes. So these would be regulations, or rather changes to regulations, which would allow part of the provisions to be suspended in order to allow a innovative product, technology, service to be tested in real market conditions. Now, this is a careful balancing exercise, because you would not want to undermine the other public policy goals of these pieces of legislation, which can be environmental protection, which can be consumer protection, health, or safety. But there may be a need to have a, let's say, a European approach to how these regulatory sandboxes could be set up also at national level, because many member states are starting to use them. Very interesting to hear the different experiences of how they are using them. But again, in order to ensure a level playing field, it might be useful to have a European coordination and guidance on regulatory sandboxes in particular. Can go to the next slide, please, where we are going to look at the talent. No, sorry, the better innovation policy part first. Yes. So what we also see in this area is that policymakers are still lacking some of the fundamental data, which is required to make good innovation policy. Certain definitions are missing across Europe. What is a startup? What is a deep tech company? So if you really want to make good policy, you need to have those things right. What is also missing often at member state level is measures to promote innovation. Public procurement or innovation procurement is a case in hand, where we see that the huge potential of public procurement, as you know, responsible for 16% of European GDP overall, could be used much better at member state or regional or even local level to procure an innovative product or service. For a startup or for a scale-up even, the best support that you can give is not that much a government grant, maybe for the early stages of development, but the best support you can give is actually a market which might be still risky, but if there is public support behind it through a public procurement process to promote that innovative service or product, that can really be the make or break for some of the promising new companies in the EU. Again, many things are out there. The innovation scoreboard gives us a rather good figure of an overall comparison, but it is missing some of the crucial data. We have innovation procurement as a legal possibility under the EU procurement rules. So there's not much of a change to the legal framework, not much of a need of a change to the legal framework, but more of how this is applied than in practice, also by the member states. And we also have technical support instrument, which is a really useful support that the EU is giving to member states to put in place these kinds of regulatory changes. It's a financial support that allows member states to call on consultants to provide the government very helpful advice on, for example, how innovation procurement or regulatory compliance advice services could be provided by the government. So good things in place. But again, we're looking at how this can be further improved. An update to the innovation scoreboard is one possibility. Better and more support to member states to help them put in place these pro-innovation policy measures is there. And Bence mentioned something very important, which is indeed coordination. Because it's true that there are a plethora of innovation policy initiatives across member states, which is a really good thing. It has taken up quite drastically over the past couple of years, but many of these are done in a sporadic and an uncoordinated way, and we do believe that member states, but also the regional and the local authorities could learn much more from each other if there was a platform where that interchange and exchange could happen. So we are developing, and I can tell you that you will probably see this reflected quite prominently in the upcoming innovation agenda, the European Innovation Council Forum, which is a forum already existing of representatives of member states and associated countries, representatives who are coming from the institutions responsible for innovation from the given member state. And this promises to be a very powerful platform where such exchange and coordination on the innovation policies could take place. So watch this space for the coordination angle. Then going to the fourth area that we're looking at very quickly is talent, because Europe continues to see a shortage of talent and skills. Many of our very promising researchers, especially at the PhD levels, and also innovators are leaving the EU for a number of different reasons. It's limited, it's partially linked to private funding, but not only. It's again, framework conditions of making it attractive for a researcher in a university to test himself or herself on the market, share his or her knowledge with market participants. Let's see what more can be done there. We also have an issue with the not so diverse environment of innovation. Women and minorities, they remain underrepresented, despite quite a significant amount of literature which indicates how innovation performance can be improved through a better involvement of women and minorities. But again, a number of things are out there already. I put a few on the slides. We have, for example, now the EU Blue Card Directive, which helps the EU member states attract talent from third countries. Not all member states have transposed that directive. The legal deadline is still ahead of us. But the earlier member states transpose, the earlier this opportunity becomes available to get new talent from third countries. But we're looking at other things. So in particular, how we can cooperate, how we can encourage cooperation, especially between research organizations and industries, mostly at member state level. And we will be looking at funding opportunities in that area in particular. And coming lastly to what I think could be the most relevant part of this presentation to you is innovation ecosystems. And this is just following up on the slides that Bence has already shared, giving it a bit of a different perspective, looking at the performance of member states within the EU and how it has developed over the last years. the bottom line is that the innovation divide between the regions in Europe has actually increased in the last couple of years. The highest performing regions in Europe are still 9 times as innovative as the lowest performing ones. Now, there are several reasons for that. We can go into the details. Technological output, as measured by patents, for example, is certainly one of those areas. But if you go to the next slide, it's quite interesting because it also illustrates that the innovation divide is not only between member states, but also within individual member states, where you see the capital regions, the big red blot, consistently outperforming the rest of the country. Now, the divide within the member states can be quite different. You see some where it is quite narrow, in others it can be quite significant even within the same member state. So any action that needs to be done will have to look at both across member state and within member state cooperations and ecosystems. Now, if we go to the next slide, and that will be my last one, and if you look at the reasons, the challenges are well known. The innovation divide continues to exist. There are 3 main reasons that we see for this innovation divide. One of them is the insufficient innovation reforms and investments at national level. But I would want to put the focus more on the reforms, because the investments, again, they're partly there, can be more in some member states. That is not the main issue. In others, it's more relevant. But the reforms, the policy reforms, are crucial. Second main reason that we see is that the scientific and the innovation institutions in the member states need to be indeed modernized, and this is where the policy support that I have mentioned comes into play. And the third big angle is the administrative capacity in some of the member states, or regions in particular. Some regions, the sometimes weak administrative capacity to put in place these innovation reforms, and this is sometimes linked to the role of innovation and the let's say the clout or the importance given to innovation vis-a-vis other government policies. So that if you look around in different member states, you will see very different ways how innovation policy is managed or targeted within the government structure. How important, how dominant is the role of the innovation minister or an innovation agency? How many difficult fights they have to put up with other sectors of the government? This is an issue that exists in many member states. Now, there have been a number of efforts to get rid of the innovation divide. Regional policy or structural funds are certainly part of the reply. We have a dedicated program under Horizon Europe called the European Innovation Ecosystems Program, which specifically looks at how these ecosystems can be developed and then better connect these. But we are now looking in the innovation agenda to go a step further. One thing will be looking at the synergies between the different funding instruments. So indeed, what can managing authorities do in member states to better coordinate the spending of structural funds with opportunities under Horizon Europe? How can these two be better linked? There are already some examples under the European Innovation Council, for example. If there's a successful applicant which doesn't get funding but reaches a certain stage of the selection process, it is automatically granted a seal of excellence, which can then facilitate the access of that particular company to regional funds. That's just one example, but we will be looking at a number of other synergies. We will be looking at partnerships for regional innovation. So these actually have already been launched as a call for regions to come and apply to develop innovation strategies, which will then help them access funding through the structural funds and also through Horizon Europe. And maybe just to add that it's not only at the EU level, of course, that these replies need to be given. The funding which is out there is quite substantial in the hands of the member states. So if we look at the recovery and resilience facility, for example, we have seen that the plans that have been submitted by all the member states, they contain nearly 40 billion, around 40 billion euros of investments dedicated to research and innovation. Many or much of this investment is expected to go to the strengthening of local or regional innovation ecosystems, and then better connecting them with the other ecosystems across the EU. But I will stop it there because I'm conscious of the time. Just the very last slide, which is purely about the process. Putting on the screen the really important deadline, which is the summer 2022. I can be a bit more precise. We are aiming at the first half of July, actually, for the adoption of the innovation agenda by the Commission. So the work is now at its, I would say, most intensive phase, discussing within the Commission with the different Commission services and then with the amongst the commissioners themselves. But the adoption date foreseen or adoption time foreseen is the first half of July, and that's where most of these things that I have explained will be put out in more detail and spelled out in more detail. So with that, thank you so much, and very happy to take further questions. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, András. I didn't want to interrupt. It didn't seem very opportune because you were explaining a great many things that are absolutely important for the people who are on this call. It was a very detailed introduction. We could be here until 5 p.m. But then the 5th of July would be probably not the date when this is published, as the birds are chirping. You know, just a couple of reflections. I'm sure Péter, as the last panelist, will talk about patent applications and the role of the underdeveloped or not so underdeveloped IPO market in Hungary vis-a-vis innovation. One thing that came to my mind concerning scientific publications, perhaps there is a difference between you know, scientific publications coming from Europe and from the US, because in the US there's a more entrepreneurial attitude of researchers, so they might actually take onto the market of what they publish, and in Europe this is perhaps a more meager percentage of those who actually publish, although I know several who do both, and it would be probably great to scale that up. Also talent and the payment of scientifically involved people. I've just come across an article that South Korea and Japan and the US are much better paid than in the US. Now, how that gap is growing or narrowing, that's a different question. With that, I would jump to the next participant, who's Bohumil Kartous, Bob, who has been a director of the Prague Innovation Institute since 2020. That is a public benefit organization established as a registered office by the capital city of Prague. So we are from the Commission level now jumping to a local level. Bohumil is an expert in education advancement and is co-founder of citizen expert platform KoroNerv 20. He also works as an advisor to Jerzy Drahoš, the chairman of the Committee of Education of the Czech Senate. And Bob is also a member of the board of the University of Economics and Management. So Bob, thank you very much for accepting our invitation. It was rather on a short notice, and we are very much looking forward to your experience that you can share with us from Czechia, from Prague in particular. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Pál. I'm really pleased to be invited to this webinar. And thank you to Bence and András for their insights, so overall insights into the innovation issue around all Europe or globally, whilst Bence and András focus this overall picture. I would like to take you to dive into the local, precisely the Czech local reality of recent and current years, because I think that it could be useful to see what been happened here in Czech Republic. I'm delighted that in some respects the Czech Republic is could be considered as a leader in the Central Eastern Europe, but we all know that we really leave behind, not only inside the European Union, but globally. Indeed, András and Bence insights provide us with really concrete numbers how the European Union leave behind some leaders like US or Southern Korea and others. So in Czech Republic, the situation is really clear. There is a structure or net of the local innovation centers, and they have been started its activities during the last 20 years, manifestly tied to the EU funding. I need to stress out that fact that EU presents and our membership together, I mean all those Visegrad countries or Central Eastern European region is absolutely important for acceleration of innovation in our countries. Those local innovation centers are owned and funded by the local governments, very often together with universities, which makes sense due to the fact their main focus is directed to R&D and knowledge transfer. They very often substitute missing natural structure which could support or accelerate innovation in less advantaged regions around the Czech Republic. With respect to that fact, in Prague, the situation is really different. We, as a Prague Innovation Institute, started our existence only 2 years ago. The last region with this initiative, and it is really understandable because of the fact that in Prague the situation is really different in comparison to other regions in Czech Republic. Obviously, the Prague is more capable to create the innovation ecosystem on its own, and it was sometimes limited for the capital of Prague to reach out to any grants and grant schemes funded by the European Union because of the living standards and the state of things in Prague, which is a richer, significantly richer region in comparison to others in Czech Republic. Those local innovation centers are focusing something like R&D and knowledge transfer, as I mentioned before, because it makes sense and effectiveness is measurable. You can simply figure out a number of supported projects and subjects during the years, and you can easily set up some criteria, and you can easily met them, and it really makes sense. And looking in the past, I really can read the purpose behind, and this purpose is really legitimate. But I think that we still need to think about a broader approach to acceleration of support innovation, and we don't need only to support existing projects or existing ideas, existing cooperations and contributions, but we need to look forward. We need to look to the future, and we need to make attempt to cultivate growth of future projects. They were not born yet, even in the form of idea. And I'm obviously talking about education or about the support of the young people to be more brave, literally brave, to take a bigger portion of the risk, and to be more open-minded if in their attempts to realize their ideas and to support what we can name in entrepreneurship, because what I think is a crucial for our countries, it doesn't matter if it's Hungary, Slovakia, or Czech Republic, is a need for a big portion of young people. They will take a risk. They will able to take their ideas and try to realize them with the support from around, with the support of public or non-public partners. But this is something what we try to implement into activities of the Prague Innovation Institute, because the future of the capital of Prague is in the young people. So we try to combine our activities which are directed to something that is really similar to another regional centers in Czech Republic. It means we try to support business, the existing business, and the startup scene. We try to collaborate with other partners in this really a bit complicated ecosystem in Prague. But besides this, we try to be active also in the support of innovations when it comes to the urban development as a municipal organization. And we also try to find the new niches, or those niches which are not occupied by other partners or other actors in innovation ecosystem, and to find those niches which are free and in the same time are important from the point of view of the public actors, so some public stakeholder, because in our DNA is to be somebody who encourage those who try to do things not only for profit, but obviously also for some social advantage, or some in some social interest and public interest. It means that we also look in for some possibilities how to support or how to encourage innovations in education process, and not only in the formal education system, but we try to find a way and build bridges between formal education system and informal education ecosystem, which is quite really broad term when it comes to the situation in the 21st century and in our physical, virtual, two-dimensional existence of human being. That means that we try to put together all those who can somehow help to provide young people any provision about the future, and give them kind of the zeal and support to be more open to, as I mentioned before, to take ideas and realize it in future. So that means that the very concrete things what we try to do is, for example, Startup Nights. Startup Nights is a project which is co-financed by the capital of Prague, and we collaborate together with the 5 universities settled here in Prague, and we try to call for those students or those graduates who started their project to be at the same time while they were students or very fresh graduates, and try to put them together and give them an opportunity to find the different collaborators among those people from the technical areas, economical areas, social science areas, and to give them opportunity to talk together and maybe finding new members of their teams and enrich their projects with new people and new ideas. The second example, what we try to do is that we brought the program Time Academia, which has grown last 30 years in Finland, and which gives the participants, the young people from the high schools or universities, the mentoring and consultation, consulting support within the process of organizing their own business. On the very start of this project is that the team of people found any organization, and after that, for the one long year period, they try to somehow give the content to this organization, give any ideas what to do, and that in every cases, at the end of this process, after 1 year period, is the functional organization. That's something what we try to do for the future of innovation in the capital of Prague. So I'm going to be really brief because I know about the limit of our time notation. So let's talk about the questions and about the remarks of others. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob, and thank you for respecting the time. I know it's difficult when you have a lot to say, and I'm sure everybody is very interested in the Czech examples, and I do have questions, so I will address them to you consequently. Now, the last member of our panel, Péter Lábody, who is the Vice President of Legal International Innovation Affairs at the Hungarian Intellectual Property Office. He's had his current role for almost a year or a little bit over a year. The responsibilities his responsibilities are managing and supervising legal, international, and obviously innovation support areas of the office. He's also a researcher at the University of Public Service Ludovika in Budapest since 2019. So he has both the experience also of academia and more of the public sector. Péter, we are very much interested in what you think about also beyond your presentation and what you think about what András said about business expenditures and patent applications and the underdeveloped IPO market in Eastern Europe, or in particular in Hungary. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm following this conversation with great interest, but I'm also aware of the time, so I'm going to try to be very concise and fast. I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to launch my presentation from here. So, do you see it? I guess I trust it works. Perfect. So, so thanks for this opportunity, and I jump into substance then. As you might expect, I will be talking about intellectual property and its link to innovation as we see it. And unfortunately, I am also not in the position of providing you very positive results from my country, because unfortunately, the number of those SMEs who protect their innovations and their percentage in Hungary is quite low. it's 3.4%. This means that the SMEs who have any kind of IP protection that is registered within our office. So this means that, in terms of copyright, where no such registration is needed, this is not covered, but from our numbers, we can have this kind of outcome. And if we compare it to the European member states, then maybe it's quite obvious that we are not among those who are leading here. So it seems that there are some member states, if you look at the right side, who are like 5 times better in these data. So we definitely have a lot to do, and maybe I'll try to highlight some background here. But before that, to put into context, from Central Europe, we see some numbers as well. And even though our region tends to be similar in some instances, this is not the case here. There are very good results coming from Poland, maybe, and of course from Czech Republic. So congratulations from here to Bob, because you're doing well here, and we try to also follow these lines. But maybe just to highlight some information on why we think, and as I could hear also coming from András, from other speakers, that IP definitely has a role here in innovation. Maybe just to show a trend which is related to the assets of companies and the business relevance of IP and of intangible assets, because as you see in the 1970s, the trend was that the tangible assets were the ones who had the big weight in the market value of companies. And now, as we see, the trend has totally changed, and the numbers now show that intangible assets are on the rise, and here definitely intellectual property plays a big role. And to show that in terms of numbers again, we see from a business perspective, of course, the revenue is something which is very important and has to be considered. And when we show this number, this means that those SMEs, those companies who care about protecting their innovations by intellectual property tend to have more revenues. We show it in terms of different kinds of protections. We start from patents, it's about 43%, and if you go towards trademarks and designs, you can see it's even higher. So given all these facts, it's really an issue that we still cannot make SMEs move towards IP, and we're working on doing that. And why is that IP is important in terms of innovation? This is a very schematic, a very simple slide. However, I think it covers the 3 main areas where IP has relevance. The first one is the most obvious one, of course. We have to protect what we innovate. In terms of the company we have, its brand, in terms of the product that we produce. Intellectual property provides a legal basis in order to do that and to enforce the rights related to your innovation. However, what has also been emphasized during this discussion, the commercialization of innovation is something which is very important. And in order to be able to do that, you need to provide a kind of legal package around your innovation in order to be able to make contracts with it, in order to be able to sell what you have, to license it, and in order to provide others the possibility to license it on your behalf. So it's also a very important part in terms of intellectual property. And lastly, which is to say maybe one of our main goals now, is to help in transforming innovations into intangible assets, in trying to value the intellectual property assets that SMEs have, in order to be able to have them as market value, in order to be able to move to banks, as András has already said. It's very important that we have common grounds within the European Union, within our region, common guidelines on what basis can such valuation take place. And then if we all stick to that, this can also be a very good way forward within Europe, within the market. And now maybe a few slides on what do we do here, why I'm speaking here maybe, and why I have this honor. And that is because our office, of course, has some issues with intellectual property. we provide services in order to help innovators. And I think one perfect tool for that, and this is not a Hungarian invention, it's also coming from the, the European level, especially from the European Intellectual Property Office, that we provide IP diagnosis, IP scans for SMEs. This means that if an innovator comes to us and says, okay, I have this kind of startup, I have this company, I've been doing this, please help me in evaluating what I'm doing in terms of, in the context of intellectual property, what kind of assets do I have here, what kind of possibilities do I have if I want to protect my values, my innovations. This is for free. Anyone can come to our office and we provide a kind of written report. We have many experts. Our office consists of 200 people, with very long-standing, backgrounds, and they are specialist experts, so they can provide practical information to those SMEs on what they should do, what kind of ways of IP protection could come into play. And this can come out in two basic streams. One is that we deal with the R&D activities. We provide a qualification. We check whether the practice, the activity, the product that they produce, the method they use can be considered R&D. And if that's the case, then they can go forward in terms of taking those benefits that have already been showed by Bence at the beginning, in terms of taxes, in terms of other benefits. And the other one is where we say what kind of protection you might have in terms of intellectual property. Should it be patents, trademarks, designs, copyright, and whatsoever. In terms of the R&D qualification, yes, of course, the state aid and tax benefits come into play. I put here an example about an ongoing basis for these benefits. And here our role really is to provide a guarantee for the companies and for the government as well. So in case it comes into question whether the given activity could be considered as R&D, then we can verify it with our experts and provide a stamped document stating that such an activity is to be considered R&D, and therefore there is a solid legal basis for providing the benefits from the state aid or in terms of the tax. And if you turn to the IP registration, of course, that's our main job to do. And not going into details on what kind of IP protections exist, maybe just a very high level slide. If we talk about the product, the company name, the brand, trademarks are the ones that you want to look for. If it's about the appearance of the product, its designs come into play. And if you talk about the product itself, it could be patented, utility model protection could be used. In case of technical industrial products, medicines, and I'm sure aware of this background here. And the other side is the copyright, whereby, for example, the applications or softwares come into play. Of course, not to mention those literature and other music, which is another area to cover. So this is the other side where we provide registration services and some legal basis that innovators can rely on. And finally, I think it's very important that we talk about money. And I will not get into details, but just want to highlight something that thanks to the environment of this innovation support, you really don't have to touch your own pocket, but you can rely on funds in Hungary as well, but also not in the Hungarian environment, but in the European and international level as well, because this protection is not only local, but can be provided in huger markets on a regional, on a global scale as well. And the European Union and the European Intellectual Property Office also has a very important package here, which is called the SME Fund, which really provides aid to SMEs if they wish to protect their innovations through IP. I don't want to go to details because time is running. You can any SME can vouch for a voucher. It can be used for trademarks, obtain patent protection as well. and we also try to cover other kinds of services also of those attorneys who help others to get IP protection, maybe also in IP education. So there are different activities that can be financed. I really urge anyone in any fora to look out for these kind of possibilities. And finally, just as a best example, maybe, or maybe not the best, but I think a quite interesting example is one of the oldest trademarks in Hungary, which is related to a mineral water, actually, that has been produced for more than 100 years. And just recently, there has been some kind of, and sorry about my ignorance about the real background or all the technical details, but in terms of the manufacturing of this water, there has been some kind of changes in regulations. So it means that the water could not be sold as such by the company. And there came the question of, okay, we have to sell this company, or we have to sell this name, which has been really on the market for Hungary for a long time. And due to this very big attention towards this trademark, the company could sell it for you know, like a really significant amount of money. And it wasn't about the product itself, but just, you know, the intellectual property, just the trademark itself that could be sold to a company. So I thought it would be important to show that such immaterial assets, which come from a trademark, for example, are very important in these terms. So I think that to underline the role here of intellectual property is very important. So I thank you here. I thought, sorry for running, but I wanted to respect the time of everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. It was really useful, and I'm also aware of the time and that it is elapsing. So I would start with one question to everyone, and I would start with Peter, just to turn around the wheel a little bit. And the question would be that in your view, a stricter regime of, well, I called it of IP controlled innovation, right? Pricing, you know, to urge market players to do better. Would that help? What tools do you imagine? What would you want more enforcement? You know, stricter enforcement, marketing, in your view, would be better advocacy that your office could provide. So, and you know, once again, I mean that how could you urge market players to apply for more IP protection, to more you know, to have control of their innovations? Because obviously there's a way of, you know, bottom up, but then this would be a top down sort of regulation, mandated intervention. Do you imagine that would help, you know, spurring innovation?
Well, thanks for the question. And yeah, this is the $1 million question, I guess, that you're putting, how we could deal with here. And I've just been to Alicante 2 days ago, where you know, around the table, all the member states, all the IP offices were talking about this. How can we proceed here? I think, you know, the money is given, you know, the possibilities are there. It's just that we don't go, the SMEs don't go one step further in order to get this protection. And I think one thing is, of course, the awareness, which we always talk about, and it might be very, you know, a commonplace, but really it should be a commonplace, because I think awareness really is something that should be emphasized. That, you know, SMEs know that there is such a possibility. It has importance. It doesn't cost you money, and you can get it. So if we can manage to, you know, convey this message, that of course that would help. But, you know, that's not enough. The other thing is that, as you said, we should, when using money and funding, we should also require maybe some kind of, you know, step forward in requiring these SMEs that, okay, they step forward. They if they intend to use the money, they should, you know, take on their side those steps that where these investments can be protected. And there is when intellectual property comes in. So I think networks should be strengthened links between the stakeholders here. When there is a fund granted, also IP protection or applications should be required, so that this can walk hand in hand, and we can at the starting point require such protections, and then I think we could step forward. And of course, as you mentioned, enforcement is very important as well. In our strategy, we want to emphasize that a new unit will focus on that in providing aid to SMEs, and with such a client focus, we hope that we can step forward. Thank you.
Peter, you're being very diplomatic in your position. What my question tried to be is more sort of directly provocative. This is the platform where you can actually tell András, right? If you need to see something in the innovation agenda in this respect. So if you miss your opportunity, don't be sorry for that afterwards. So if you think that there is something that the new innovation agenda should contain in this respect, in one sentence, and really in one sentence, now this is the moment. And forget that you're representing, if you can, an office, just in your opinion, right? So
yeah, I think it would be important to provide more emphasis on IP here, and to require to work more closely when we put up such schemes. I think that would be important from our policy perspective. Thank you. And now I get back my hat.
Yes, thank you very much, András. The next question is to you. I hope you've taken good note of the message or the messages here. My question to you would be along with these lines that Péter just mentioned last. That in particular concerning the importance of public procurements, which you mentioned, and I think Bence also referred to that. And the role of public procurement in harnessing innovation. We do know that the EU, public authorities spend about 14% of the overall GDP on services paid by the public sector. But we also know that mostly these services are open in applications to grand big companies with 20, 30 years of experience in serving the public sector, and the EU institutions are no exceptions from this. Startups and smaller companies cannot even apply for these contracts because of the sort of the grant or the tender criteria. Is the new innovation agenda targeting any of this? So or have you been thinking about how public procurement, more generally, if you can, obviously within the limits that your role allows you, how the new innovation agenda is going to target public procurement and perhaps the access to public procurement? You're
sorry, I'm just unmuting myself. Yes, indeed. No, thanks, Pál. Indeed, as I mentioned, it remains public procurement, and innovation procurement in particular remains a really powerful way to support innovative companies. The rules, at least at the EU level, which stem from the procurement directive of 2014, which actually sets out very simple rules on how the innovation partnership procedure, it's called the innovation partnership procedure, can be used. It is being used in a very diverse manner by the member states. So some use it, some use it less. We want to understand why that is happening, because we don't see, and we haven't seen any calls for a revision of those rules. It seems to suggest that the rules which allow public authorities in the member states to use that instrument, the rules are there, and they can use it, and how they use it, it's pretty much up to them. So if there are ways to improve the access of smaller companies to these processes, that can be done at the national level. I don't think it's something where the EU in particular should further intervene. Now, having said that, because we want to have a good overview of what is happening in the different national policy frameworks, We are thinking about setting up what could be a EU innovation procurement observatory. And this observatory would actually collect the different experiences from member states, from these national frameworks, also how they use investments for innovation procurement. And maybe that will give us a bit of more detail of what is working well and what is not. I mean, I can tell you that there are very, very few member states, approximately 1/3 of them, who have national strategies specifically on innovation procurement. So it is possible to do that. If you look at OECD countries, 4/5 of them have such strategies. In the EU, 1/3 of the member states have that. I cannot tell you, by the way, if Hungary has one or not. You must be more knowledgeable on that than I am. But it shows that there is a different degree of interest in having a national strategy in place, specifically on innovation procurement. But the opportunity is there.
Thank you. That was very useful. I took note of a couple of things you mentioned. Bob, turning to you and leaving Bence as the last participant or panel member to respond. We've heard that the money is there, and originally I was thinking about asking you whether better targeted funding regime or more money would make a better innovation ecosystem development plausible in Prague, but from everybody I think we do understand quite clearly that the money is there. How you use the money is really the question. If you could also ask one question to András and or suggest something for the financing part. Forget about the policy part, but he also heads the unit with access to finance. What would be that sort of request that from your position, and you can take into account educational innovation and development. What would be that question that you would ask András?
I think that as you said, money is here, and those are money from European Union or from the national budget here in Czech Republic, and a lot of money is coming from the private investors. Yeah, I think that it's not a problem. Yeah, well, if I'm in the discussion with those private investors here in Czech Republic, you can get every time the same result. Yeah, we have money and we are ready to invest, but we have a really small number of the projects where we would like to invest, where we can see any profitable future. Yeah? So this is part of the innovation which where the care is good enough, because the profitable projects will be always in the center of the focus of the private investors. Yeah, what I can see is really need to find a way and to create the channels to fuel the money to those projects which have some public, the social, cultural importance, and are not profitable enough to be in the center of the attention of the private investors. This is the first thing. And the second, I think that we need all, I think, here in the Central Europe to make our homeworks on our national levels, because what I can see here is not a problem with the amount of money coming from the European Union. Yeah, we are in a really good position, both Hungarian and Czech Republic, as a pure receivers of money. Yeah, now, but what I can see is sometimes pretty understandably complicated system how money are leveraged, are channeled to the final receivers here, and this is the problem also now. Yeah, if I can take a look on some operation programs here in Czech Republic, how complicated are and what futile and useless administration is very often behind. So to make it more easier, I mean, make it to this process the bigger sense is what I think really necessary to help to leverage money into the innovation here in Czech Republic. And I'm very sorry, I need to leave now because I have a meeting very soon. So thank you again for invitation. It was really fruitful and useful for me, and I hope that we can meet again, and I hope we can meet physically.
Thank you, Bob, and we obviously understand that, and we are going over time. But just last question to Bence. From your point of view, you know, we know that Hungary is, or used to be at least, the most innovative place on earth, from the, you know, ballpoint pen to Rubik cube and all the rest. We live of history. What can the institution do in order to help participants to better understand what they need to do? I see a very important role of first, you know, primary research, and not necessarily, you know, the consulting that comes out of it, but primary research, understand the behavior of market players and how they could participate in innovation. Innovation ecosystems, innovation partnerships beyond the borders. So what do you think that Századvég can do in this respect to advance market players' understanding or even interest in taking their ideas one step forward?
With regard to this question, what comes to my mind are our experiences when we work on local level with municipalities and regions, which we have done in many cities in Hungary. And one of the key things is, and I wanted to appreciate Bob's stance on that when he pointed out that what needs to be encouraged is the risk taking. That companies and also young people, he mentioned it with young people, but we experience the same thing with companies, especially local companies, local SMEs, they're willing to take risks. This is something where Századvég's mission in this is that when we talk to municipalities and local regions, we try to encourage them to build up these local ecosystems, which help the local actors, the local companies, to gain trust in this process, to believe that if they take the risks, then eventually results will follow, to encourage them and to give them the support which they need in order to be able to innovate and to be able to grow. So this to support this cooperation would be our mission. And in this matter, also I appreciate what András said with the forum, the innovation forum, which they are planning to set up. I think this is the way to go. It is very important to keep in mind for these to follow the subsidiarity principle. So really to involve representatives of small companies, of small enterprises, of regions, to go to the local level to be able to reach them. I think the large players are reached also in Central Eastern Europe. It's really the smaller companies who have the largest potential for innovation and growth.
Thank you. And with that, maybe just one more line of thought that I would like to open on that. And I think these opportunities, when you have the representatives of different levels of the public sector who are all involved in, from policy making to enforcement, implementation, and consulting to market players, these opportunities should be should be replicated, because you know, most of them, and we all have this experience. Most of them, when it comes to EU, when it comes to national level administration, in particular SMEs, which are 90–95% of EU businesses, they have a very distant understanding, if not fear. So risk averseness may also be fueled by this. So that these occasions, I believe, are very important, and they've always proven to be a key to help you know, participants to jump that one step and take their ideas and their willingness further. So with that, I would like to conclude. Thank you very much, everybody. We have gone over the allocated time. I did not feel that it's appropriate to stop the presentations because they all contributed to the discussion to a great extent. Thank you very much again. I do hope that we could have, as Bob said, also a physical meeting either in Budapest, Brussels, Prague, or wherever, and to open up the discussions to other participants. Thank you everybody who participated. As I said, the recording is going to be available. A short summary is going to be available on the website. If you have questions which we could not answer due to the lack of time, do send them. You do have the at least one email from Századvég, who when you receive the link, so you can possibly reply to that. And again, have a nice rest of the day. It's Friday, so it's soon weekend. Kids are back from school, so probably it's not going to be easier than the weekdays. Take care. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.